What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of my beginner's guide to Path of Exile. This video, we're going to be talking about skill gems, which are the items that you need in order to be able to actually use skills and abilities in Path of Exile. That might sound a little bit weird because in traditional games, you just kind of earn your abilities as you level up, or maybe you earn them through putting in some talent points. But in Path of Exile, it's a little bit different because they're actually items, and you have to equip them and level them up and modify them and other stuff like that. So it gets a little bit complicated, and it's a little bit different from what a lot of people are used to in playing various RPGs and MMOs. So we're going to cover those skill gems, how they work, how you use them, and what to look for when you're trying to improve and modify them in the future. Now, this video is going to build upon my previous beginner's guide videos, so be sure to check out the playlist that has all those. That's going to be in the description below, and you might see a card for it up over there. Keep in mind that as we go throughout this process, you're going to end up with more questions than answers in most of these videos, but I'm going to be answering a lot of those questions in future videos. So hit the subscribe button, like the video if you want to see more videos like this and you want to stay up to date for when the next beginner's guide comes out. All right, without anything else said there, we're going to jump in and get started. And I'm going to mention that we are building upon the previous video where I talked about the classes in Path of Exile. We're going to be building on that a little bit here in this video. And we're also going to be tackling the stats, the core statistics, the core attributes that you have to manage within Path of Exile as a big part of the skill gem system here. So we're going to be checking out the wiki. We're going to be checking out some additional resources and also taking a look at these skill gems in game as well. So let's jump in and let's get started. Okay, so what is a skill gem? For that, we're going to jump into Path of Exile and we're going to take a look here. So I'm going to go over to my stash, and I got a little tab here where I hoard gems. These are skill gems. You could pick them up. You could put them in your inventory. You could put them back into your bank, which is what you're seeing over here on the side. You get all this crazy text when you hover over them. But just to be really clear, skill gems are actually items. I have a couple in the wrong tab here. We're going to move those over. So what do you do with these items, right? They don't do anything for you if they're in your bank. They don't do anything for you if they're in your inventory. In Path of Exile, what you actually have to do to be able to use these abilities is you have to slot them into your gear. Now, a piece of equipment, such as a helmet or an axe or a pair of boots, in Path of Exile can come with any number of slots or sockets on it. And that's something we're going to talk about in a future video more in depth, but I do want to show it to you here. So this is a pair of gloves, okay? And these gloves have 3 sockets. You can see that with the 3 circles here. That means that you can put 3 skill gems into this particular set of gloves. So if I wanted to, I could come back over to my gems and I could grab some of these and I could put them in here. Okay. And then that would mean that if I then took this pair of gloves and I equipped them, I would now have access to the skill gems that I put in that piece of gear. Okay, so that's the basic function of skill gems. They're items, and they go into your gear, and you equip that gear in order to use them. So if you want to cast Fireball, you first need to have the Fireball skill gem. Then you need to put that skill gem into a socket on a piece of gear. Then you need to equip that piece of gear on your character. So there's a lot of management of this that comes from trying to figure out what piece of gear you want, how many sockets, etc., etc. Now we're going to come back to sockets and talk about those a little bit later, but we're going to talk more about the skill gems themselves before we actually get into that. So let's jump over and take a look at the wiki. So we know that these skill gems are items in game that give you your skills, and they also can give you passive skills as well. You can earn them from quest rewards, you can purchase them from vendors, you can get them as drops. So you can get these skill gems from all over the place. Some skill gems are not available to you until you hit a particular level or you unlock a particular quest as you are leveling up. But they're not that difficult to acquire. There's only a couple of them that are very rare, and they're pretty specialized skill gems. So when you're starting up Path of Exile, you can pretty much plan on having access to just about any of the skill gems in the game once you get to end game and you're able to purchase them from the vendor, even if you don't find them. So what I want to talk about here are the skill gem colors. And for this, we're going to go over to our vendor. So we have a vendor here at the end of the game, and there's several other vendors as you level up and progress. And we're going to be able to take a look at what they offer us. So I mentioned earlier that we were going to talk about those core attributes. As a quick refresher, there are 3 core attributes in Path of Exile. We have strength, dexterity, and intelligence. When it comes to skill gems, your skill gems are associated with one of those core elements. So if we jump back into our passive tree that we talked about in the last video, you're going to see we've got red for strength. If we go up here, we've got blue for intelligence. And if we go over here, we've got green for dexterity. And I mentioned that as you are playing your character, it makes it easier for you to access certain things if you pick a character that starts close to what you want to do. And this is part of that process. When you are looking at your skill gems, you have red gems, which are corresponded to strength. You have green gems that are associated with dexterity, and you have blue gems that are associated with intelligence. So let's take a look at what all goes into a skill gem. So over here on the right-hand side, you're going to see a tooltip for Fireball. I wanted to go with Fireball because it's a pretty common ability in many RPGs and MMOs, so I think it's going to be pretty easy to relate to here. But we're going to cover all the stuff that's in this tooltip, and that'll help us gain a deeper understanding of skill gems and how they work. So first off, we have Fireball. Okay, that's the title of the gem. And if we hop back over, we can see this one is Intimidating Cry, this one is Sunder, etc., etc. Underneath that, we have 4 different tags. So the tags for Fireball are Projectile, Spell, AoE, and Fire. Okay, and those are going to come into play in just a little bit. We have the radius of the spell. So this is kind of like the AoE range that the spell hits in. We have the cost of the spell. So spells may cost mana, they might cost health or some other resource. And you can see that cost here. We have the cast time, so how long it takes for your character to actually cast the spell and complete it. Critical strike chance of the spell. Pretty straightforward there. This is the chance that it has to deal a critical strike. We have effectiveness of added damage. Now, this is a little bit of a weird one for Path of Exile. Basically, what this means is if you have a modifier on a piece of gear that says something like plus 10 fire damage with spells, which Fireball is a spell, then that means that on a normal spell that has 100% of added damage effectiveness, it would add 10 to that spell. But because the effectiveness of added damage for Fireball is 240%, you're actually going to get 24 damage added to that spell instead of the normal 10. So the higher this percentage is, the better this spell is able to make use of any damage that you add to your spells and abilities through things like gear and talent points. Next, we have the projectile speed. So this is how fast the projectile will travel, meaning a high speed will get to the target a lot faster. A slow speed will kind of crawl along. And there are different abilities where having a slow speed is actually a benefit, such as if you're shooting out an ability that is going to deal AoE around it, you may want it to chug along pretty slowly and kind of deal that damage in place and take a lot more time to complete. Then we have the actual description of the spell here. It says, unleashes a ball of fire towards a target, which explodes, damaging nearby foes. Then underneath that, we have the per 1% quality modifiers here. Now, this is something we're not going to get into in this video, but just know that each gem is able to have its quality increased, and when that happens, you get a small benefit from it. We're not going to talk about quality or how to improve any of that stuff in here. We're just talking about the baseline for skill gems and how they work. But as the quality of Fireball increases, you will gain 1% increased projectile speed for every 1% of quality that you put onto this gem. Quality does cap out at 20%, generally speaking. So you could get up to 20% increased projectile speed from this Fireball gem if you did that. Underneath that, we have the actual technical mechanical information of the spell. So up here we have the description, which is all well and good for kind of getting an understanding of sort of what the ability does. But this text here actually tells us what the ability does mechanically. So in our first line, we have deals a lot of numbers in parentheses, 2 more numbers in parentheses, fire damage. So when you see this, it means that this ability will deal X amount of damage to X amount of damage. So it could deal 9 to 14, or it could deal 1095 to 1643. These numbers are dependent upon the level of the gem. So let's hop back over here, and we're going to take a look at Fireball. And if we were to look at it here, you'll see that it actually says deals 9 to 14 fire damage. Okay. Over here on this chart, you can see a list of how that changes as the skill gem levels up. So you can see that 9 to 14 is when the skill gem is level 1. And if we continue to go up, we can find that 1095 to 1643 fire damage range. Okay. So that's the range that this can deal damage in. We'll talk about how gems level up in just a minute. Underneath that, again, if you see that parentheses with a number in it, it usually means that this is a number that will change as the skill gem levels up. So Fireball starts out with a 20% chance to ignite enemies, and it gains up to a 39%. Now, Ignite is a damage over time debuff specific to fire. It basically burns the target. So you're going to deal fire damage. You're also going to burn the target with a damage over time if you hit that Ignite. And then if you do hit that Ignite, it will deal 50 to 88% more damage when it does hit. Then projectiles gain radius as they travel farther, up to plus 0 to 9 radius. So what this means is the farther the Fireball goes, the broader the actual ball gets. So if you fire it further away, it's going to be bigger by the time it impacts. Now, we're not going to get super into everything here about Fireball, and I wanted to read this off to you just to kind of give you an idea of, some of the stuff that can happen with these gems. But generally speaking, this is where you're going to find all those mechanical details. So obviously up here in our description, it says unleashes a ball of fire towards the target, which explodes, damaging nearby foes. But we get a lot more information about what that actually does here in this text. So we know we're going to deal some damage, some fire damage. We have a chance to ignite. If we do ignite, we're going to deal more damage with it. And as the projectile travels farther, it's going to get bigger and bigger as it goes. So that gives us a lot more detail than just this right here. So let's talk really quickly about spells and skill gem levels. So as you gain experience on your character, you're going to level up. But the gems that you have equipped in your gear will also gain experience and level up as well. So if we are to look at, say, this ability here, vulnerability, if you look down towards the bottom after the mechanical info we just talked about, you're going to see a little bar there. And this one says like 6.5 million out of 211.8 million. That's the amount of XP that I've earned towards the next level on this gem. If you look at the top underneath the tags, you'll see the level is 19. The general max level for gems is 20, so I'm almost at the max level on this vulnerability gem. And I've got that 6.5 million XP needed, so I've got to get the other 205.8 million to get up to level 20. So as you level up, your skill gems that you have equipped on your character will gain XP with you, level up, and become more powerful. And that's where you see both this table here that shows the differences and how this ability is going to level up. And that's also why you have the numbers in parentheses here. So we've talked about the skills. We've talked about the different stats that they're associated with. And that's actually pretty important because if we were to look at, say, Fireball here, right now, Fireball requires level 1. If we look at some of the gems I have equipped, so let's look at Vulnerability again. If you look in that section where it says requires, you're going to notice some extra stuff there. It's not just level 1. So first off, we have level 68. Now, the level of the gem has gone up for a couple of reasons. One, some gems just aren't available at level 1, so they might require level 10 or level 15 or level 38. So different skills and abilities you won't actually be able to find until later on in the game, once you've leveled up or you've found the appropriate vendors. But as you level up a gem, its required level to use will also go up. This is so you can't take a Fireball, get it to level 20, and then equip it on your level 1 character. So if we were to take this Fireball and we were to gain a couple levels on it, it would say like requires level 3 or 5 or 8. And that just keeps you from using super OP abilities on really low level characters. Also, you'll see that under here where it says requires level 68, it also says it requires 95 strength and 66 intel. Now, a lot of these gems at the start are not going to require a whole lot of stats to get started with, but you will notice that as you get to some of these higher gems, such as Frostbite, if we look at that tag, it says requires level 24 and 25 dexterity and 37 intelligence. This means that from the get-go, if you don't have 25 dexterity and 37 intelligence, you cannot use this gem. And that kind of brings us back to the talent tree that we talked about in the last video. So if you are over here on the strength side of the tree, you can definitely get some dexterity or some intelligence if you need it, but it's going to be a lot easier for you to get dexterity and intelligence if you're already in that section of the tree. So if you were like, I'm going to use Frostbite, I definitely want to have it, and I'm going to have a bunch of other dexterity skills and intelligence skills that I want to use, then that's where you're kind of a little bit better off choosing to start in that area of the tree to play that way. Now, I want to stress that you do not have to do that at all, okay? You can hit any of the stat requirements for any of the gems in the game without having to go into that particular section of the tree. Because, for example, if you look at the helmet that I'm using here, which we haven't talked about items yet, but we'll get there. If you look under the requires level 67, that first blue line there says plus 62 to dexterity. And then also if we look back at my passive tree, I've got a node right here that gives me plus 30 to dexterity. So, and I've got a couple here that give me some as well. So I've actually managed to get quite a bit of dexterity on my character. And you can see I'm 157 dexterity right now without being on a character that is dexterity based or in that section of the tree. So you can look at these gems and you can plan to use any of them. Just when you're doing that, you have to understand that a lot of these gems have strength requirements, intel requirements, and dexterity requirements. And these gems and those requirements will increase as you level them up. So if we take a look right here at Fireball again, if you look on this chart, this right here is the level required of the character level required to use this gem. And this is the intel requirement to use the gem. So if you look at level 1 Fireball, it requires level 1 character level and no stat requirements. So you can just play it as it is. At level 2, it requires character level 2 and 0 intelligence. At level 3, it requires character level 4 and 16 intelligence. If we go up to the max here, level 20, it requires character level 70, and it requires 155 intelligence. And this is where a lot of new players can get hung up, is that they don't know that as the gems level up, the stat requirements also increase. And so you could be trying to play with a bunch of, strength, dex, and intel, just a wide array of crazy abilities. And then you hit a point where all of a sudden you can't use your spell because you don't have the right attributes, or you can't level up your spell because you don't have the right attributes. So I wanted to emphasize here that you can use any combination of gems in the game. You just have to make sure that you have the required stats in order to do that. If you look at my character over here, I'm using all these little red circles are strength-based skills that I'm using. All of the green ones are dexterity-based, and all of the blue ones are intelligence-based gems that I'm using. And you can see I'm using all three colors on this character, but I've also made sure that my character meets the requirements for the stats that are needed to use all these gems. So there's a lot of freedom and flexibility in what you can do with your skill gems. You just have to be mindful of those requirements. So we've talked about the stats associated with the different gems. We've talked about what goes into the tooltip of the gems. We've talked about gem levels and how the gems will level up with you when they're equipped to your character. And we've also talked about the increasing requirements of gems as they level. So the next thing we're going to do is talk about the two different types of gems. There are two big, broad categories of gems, okay? And those are active skill gems and support gems. So if we're here on our vendor, there's going to be two tabs. The first tab is active skill gems. So let's hop over, and there's going to be two tabs per color. So here we are again, we've got our fireball over here. This is in the tab that has active skills in it. Now, these active skills have this sort of oval shape that's kind of diagonal within the box. And that's a really easy way to tell that the gem that you're looking at is an active skill gem. So what is an active skill gem? An active skill gem is an ability that you can actually use. It does something when you push a button. So let's take a look at this real quick. If I go up here and I just take these gloves we looked at earlier, I can put in fireball. And then all of a sudden down here, you'll see that fireball pops up on my action bar, and I'll be able to cast fireball. If I take it out of my gear, it's gone. I can't use it. Okay, so as soon as I put it back in, there we go. So this is an active skill gem. I could grab a different one. Let's grab Firestorm. Okay, you see Firestorm popped in there. Let's do one more. Let's do Spirit Offering. Again, that popped in there. So these are your active skill gems, and they're the ones that add an ability to your bar. The next tab here is full of support gems, support skill gems, okay? And these do not give you an active ability. So let's say I was to take this Summon Phantasm support and plug it in there. You'll notice nothing popped up on my bar. And that's because this doesn't actually give you an active ability. Now, these support skill gems are circular compared to the ovals of the active skill gems. So that's one easy way to tell that you are looking at a support gem, is because it will have that circular shape. This applies across all the different colors. So we see the oval shapes here for the strength active gems, and if we click over, we see the circular shape for the support gems. So if you can't use these gems as abilities, what's the point of them? Well, the point of these gems is they modify your active abilities, okay? So let's go, and we're going to go show off how this works a little bit. Pardon me. So we're going to jump in here, and we're going to find a piece of gear I can use real quick. Go to our gloves, and let's go with these. Okay. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We've got our fireball. We're going to put our fireball in our gloves, and then we're going to take a look at some of the ways that these modifying support gems can actually help us. So here's what we're going to do. I've got a fireball, and I can fire it off. Pretty cool, right? We got our little little tiny fireball. This is what the skill does by default. Now, when you're looking at your gear, you have the sockets we talked about before, but you're going to notice that some of these sockets have a little link between them. So this one here, there's a link between these sockets, but there's not a link between these sockets. On this pair of gloves, we have a link here, here, and here, which means all 4 of these are connected. Whereas here, it's only the 2 here that are connected, and this one's off by itself. When you have a piece of gear that has these connections, it means that you can add support gems into this piece of gear that will modify an active spell. So if I were to take Fireball out and I were to put the Summon Phantasm in there, which is a support gem, and just to iterate for you, if you look under the title, Summon Phantasm Support, you'll see it says Support Minion, okay? And that lets you know it's a support gem as well. And this doesn't do anything. I've got this here, this greater multiple projectile support, and I can add that here. This is literally doing nothing for me. The only thing this would let me do is level up these gems, because as long as the gems are equipped, you can gain experience for them. So if you want to level up a gem and you don't quite have the links and stuff to put it in and make it useful, you can still just drop it into a slot and level it up anyway. That's all this is doing, okay? But if we were to put our Fireball back in there, which is an active skill, and then we were to take the greater multiple projectile support and add it in here, now because these 2 sockets are linked, this support is modifying Fireball. So let's take a look at this once again, okay? We can just shoot off our regular old Fireball. Pew! If we add in our greater multiple projectile support, and then we fire a Fireball, look at that. Multiple fireballs. Okay, let's see what else we have in here that we might be able to modify those with. So we can go in here and we can type supports and we can take a look around. And if you look, it says Hex Touch Support, and there's a little window off to the side with the kind of reddish brown bar that says Active Skills. This will show you a list of the active skills that you have equipped and whether or not this gem will affect those. So if you look at this Hex Touch Support would affect Fireball, but it will not affect Herald of Purity or Intimidating Cry. And you can see that because it's got the green check next to the stuff it will affect and the red check next to the stuff that it won't. So let's see what else we have in here. We've got Faster Casting. So we could do that. We've got, let's do Unleash. Okay, so we're gonna plug Unleash in here. And then let's see if we have another one that we can use that'll make sense in here. We've got Chain, that would work, but it's gonna be hard to show it to you. And I'm purposely kind of mulling this over and just showing you guys, like, this is kind of what you do in Path of Exile. We've got faster projectile support, okay? So let's show how each one of these is going to change the gem, and then we will put it all together. Okay, so by default, we've got our normal Fireball, right? We can add in our greater multiple projectile support, and we've got multiple projectiles. We've got our faster projectiles, which if we use this one, you'll see Fireball shoots a lot faster. And then we've got our Unleash supports. So what this does is take a look at Fireball down here, and you're going to notice a counter on this one, 0, 1, 2, 3. So this will stack up to 3 instances of the spell while you're not using it. And when you do use it, it'll fire off 3 of those spells at a time. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to add all of these together. We're going to put our faster, we've got our Unleash, we're going to put our faster projectiles, and we're going to put our greater multiple projectiles in there. So we've taken that one simple Fireball, we've supported it with 3 different gems, and now we've got like a machine gun Fireball, okay? So that is the kind of cool stuff you can do with the active gems and the support gems in Path of Exile. And just to, I just want to keep doing this because it's like, how cool is that compared to just the regular Fireball? So here's another little cool thing that you'll notice. If I put my cursor way out here, the fireballs are kind of together. If I put it close to my character, they spread out a lot more. So there's just a lot that you can do in Path of Exile with the different gems. So when it comes to these gems, it's all about trying to figure out what active skills do I want to use and how do I want to support those active skills in my gameplay. So maybe you don't want a bunch of fireballs. Maybe you want one big, huge, powerful fireball. Well, you would find the kind of support gems that line up and match that. So what we're going to do next in the video is we're going to come over here to a website called PoEDB, Path of Exile Database. Now, when you're here, you can go to Gem, and it's going to take you to this page, which covers the active skill gems available. And you can also click right here on support gems to see the support gems that are available. Okay, and what we're going to do here is we're going to talk about tags. Okay, so tags are super important, and this is another place where new players will get hung up. So if you noticed when we were looking at these support gems and we look in the active skill window on the text here, that this says it does support fireball and it doesn't support any of the other abilities on my character right now. There's an easy way for you to know if a support gem is going to work with an active skill gem. So if we look at greater multiple projectile support, right underneath the title, it says support projectile. So if we look at fireball, you're going to see underneath the title, projectile, spell, AoE, fire. Let's take a look at flicker strike. Okay, this is a different ability I have, but we're just focused on the tags here. Attack, melee, strike, movement, duration. What did you notice? Hopefully you noticed that the support gem, greater multiple projectile support, has the tag projectile. Fireball has the tag projectile, and flicker strike does not have the tag projectile. So for your support gems to work with your active skill gems, they need to have matching tags. Okay. Again, if we look at the faster projectile support, you're going to see it has the projectile tag, and that's why it also works with fireball. And if you see the unleash support, this one says spell support, and obviously there's no projectile tag here, right? But you'll see spell, and if we go to fireball, spell. Okay, so it does have the matching tags. If we were to look at this one, summon phantasm support, this says support and minion. Now this one doesn't need to have the matching tag because it's kind of a special case there. You can read in the description, it says supports skills that can hit enemies or create minions. So because this doesn't have a specific tag there, it usually means it's a generic support that will work with just about any active skill. And you can see here that the majority of the skills under active skills this does work with. There's a couple that it doesn't, and that's because those don't actually hit enemies. So in general, you can match up the tags, and you can guarantee yourself that if the tags match up, the gems will work. And occasionally you'll have to read the description there. Most of the time, this is because it affects a very broad range of abilities and is not a super specific support. So when we're here on PoEDB looking at the active skill gems, what you're going to see here is the tags in this group. So let's say that we were like, man, we really love the greater multiple projectile supports. I really just want to be able to just like fire off a whole bunch of stuff, but I don't really want to use fireball. I think I want to use something ice-based. You can come to this website and you can click on projectile, because we know in order to use greater multiple projectiles, we need projectiles, right? So we'll click that, and that's going to filter it down for us. So you'll notice we've got a pretty long list of all the different active skill gems here. We can go projectile, and that's going to narrow it down. And you can see that if you want to use projectiles, you're going Dex or you're going Intel, right? Remember, the colors are associated with the stats. So green gems are Dexterity, blue gems are Intel, and red gems are strength. So let's swap this. If we were to look at melee, you're going to notice that intel's kind of off the table here to a degree. Okay. So we look at projectiles, and then the next thing we want is we want ice or cold. So we can go up and click on cold. Okay, these are the options of active skill gems that we might want to use. So, okay, let's say we want to use Ice Spear. That sounds cool. That sounds like a cool ability. I'd like to throw a spear of ice. So, a couple of things you can do here. You can click on Ice Spear, and on this page, you can scroll down, and this will show you the support gems that actually work with Ice Sphere, and you can confirm and just make sure that greater multiple projectiles is going to work. There it is right there. So we can confirm that this spell can be supported by greater multiple projectile support. Awesome. Now, if we were to go back and we were to switch to the support skill gems, you're going to notice they have similar tags. So here's another projectile one. Let's click on that and see. Okay, so we've got a couple different options here. We've got greater multiple projectile support. What else do we have? We've got chain. We've got slower projectiles. We've got volley. We've got barrage. Okay. We've got a bunch of different options here. Let's say, maybe we want to try barrage. So let's go back to our active skill gems. Let's go projectile. We're going to go cold. Then we're going to go back to Ice Spear. Let's see. Can we use it? Now you could obviously control F here and kind of figure that out if you wanted to. So we're looking for barrage. Oh, okay. So either I spelled barrage wrong, which is, but yep. So you can see, oh, okay. For whatever reason, it looks like barrage doesn't work with Ice Spear. Oh well, we'll have to find a different support to use. So we can go back here and do this the easy way and go projectile cold, and then we can go Ice Spear, scroll down a little bit, and we can just look through and see maybe what we want. Let's see, we've got fork support. That could be cool. We've got ice bite, poison, all kinds of stuff we can do. So you can see, we can go in here and we can kind of check out the different supports, and there's a lot of them that will work with Ice Spear. But for right now, let's go and check. Let's see if I have an Ice Spear in here. I probably don't. So we're going to go back and we're going to purchase one. So when it comes to your active skill gems and your support gems in Path of Exile, the key here is that having the appropriately colored sockets on your gear to use the support gems and active skill gems that you want is super important, and the more connections you have, the more supports you can add to your ability. So let's go ahead, and just because I want to show off some more examples here, we're going to grab Ice Spear so we can show off a different version and not just fireball it up the entire time. And then I'm going to show you a couple of things that I have on this actual character. Okay, so let's go ahead and grab in our Ice Spear. We're going to put that in with Fireball. And then we'll go ahead and do our Unleash. We're going to do our greater multiple projectiles. And we're going to do our faster projectiles. Okay, so let's take a look at Ice Spear. Pretty crazy. So let's take all these supports off. And then you can see what Ice Spear looks like all by itself. Boop. So your supports make a huge difference. Now I want to show you one other thing here. Let's go ahead and put in Fireball. And let's add in greater multiple projectiles and faster projectiles. So we just put two active skills in here with two different supports. So what's going to happen? So we should have our greater multiple projectiles and our faster supports. So we should see, there we go. We see our little extra things there, but we can actually swap over to Fireball and it also does it. So you can see here that we've taken two active skills, and while Fireball doesn't affect Ice Spear in any way, the two supports that we put in here are affecting both of those gems and allowing us to use them both with those effects. Okay, this gets really complicated, and we're going to talk about this a lot more when we get into gear, but I just want to emphasize that there's a lot of combinations you can do here. So let's take a look at a couple of the things that I'm using. So if we look here, I'm using a skill called Leap Slam, and Leap Slam just jumps you across and does some damage in an area. And I have this supported by faster attacks. So this allows me to cast Leap Slam and complete that cast faster. I also have Pride in here, which is not a support gem, and it's not a support gem, and it doesn't actually give me an active skill to use. It gives me what's called an aura, and we're going to talk about this stuff in just a minute. But this isn't being supported by anything. Like, it's not an attack, so it's not supported by faster attacks, but I just needed to put it somewhere on my gear, so I threw it in here. We can look here. I've got Sweep, and Sweep is an ability that spins you in a circle like that and attacks around you. And I actually have 4 different support gems that are added in here for Sweep. So I have Brutality, I've got melee physical damage, multi-strike, and fortify. So I've got a lot of different effects going on there. And I've got this set up so that I can take this heavy strike ability and swap it out with sweep when I need to, and that gives me a nice single target ability that I can use. So in this case, if I'm going to be fighting a whole bunch of stuff, I'm going to use sweep, and that way I can just kind of like clear around me. Or if I'm fighting against a big boss or a single target, I can put in heavy strike with the same support gems and attack with that instead. Then over here on my weapon, I have a 6-link going on. And this is the ability Flicker Strike, and it's being supported by Ruthless, melee physical damage, fortify, brutality, and multi-strike. So this brings up an important point, right? I've got fortify here, but I also have fortify here. And that's because fortify in this scenario is only supporting the skill that it's linked to. And the cool thing is, if you hover over the supports on your gear, it highlights the support and it highlights the ability it's supporting. So you'll notice that as I move over these, they keep highlighting Flicker Strike because that's what's actually being supported by the gem. And if I hover over the actual gem, you'll see all the abilities highlight that are supporting this gem. So if I hover over faster attacks, you're going to see it supporting Leap Slam, and Leap Slam is being supported by faster attacks. And if I hover over Pride, you're going to see nothing is affecting that. So it's an easy way to make sure that your links and your gems and everything are working the way that they should be. Now we're going to close off this video by hopping back over to PoEDB and talking about some of the types of gems. We're going to look at the tags and talk a little bit about what each one of them means, but we're not going to dive too deep into examples or anything. I'm just going to give you a brief overview, so if you're using this, it'll make a little bit more sense. So AoE is abilities that have an area of effect. Attacks, there are 2 types of major abilities in Path of Exile, attacks and spells. Spells scale off of the level of the gem that you're using, and attacks scale off the damage of your weapon. I'm going to have a separate video talking about attacks and spells and the differences between them because it is a little bit of a deeper topic and it's super important. Just know that when it comes to these gems, if you're using an attack, it's going to scale based on your weapon. If you're using a spell, it's going to scale based off the level of the gem. And like I said, there's going to be a whole video on that because it's super important. Auras are things that give you passive bonuses. Okay, so if we go back over to the game, right here I have vulnerability. This is an aura. So actually, this one's not an aura. It's a curse, my bad. Pride. I have pride, right? Pride is an aura. So if you look on the tags, you're going to see aura. This casts an aura that causes nearby enemies to take more physical damage. So auras are things that work in an area around you, and they may be buffs for you or negative things for your enemies. Blink is a type of movement skill. Bow focuses on abilities that can be used with bows. Brands are the sort of weird abilities that I talked about in the previous ability. Chaining is for abilities that can chain from one enemy to another. So when the enemy gets hit, it'll bounce to a different one. Channeling are abilities that you basically have to hold down the button. And as long as you're holding down the button, you'll keep casting the spell. Chaos is one of the elements, or not the elements, but it's one of the types of damage you can deal in the game. So is cold and fire and physical and also lightning. Okay, so those are the main. You got your elementals are cold, fire, and lightning. Chaos is its own thing, and then physical damage is focused on, dealing damage with weapons and things of that nature. So those are the 5 main types of damage you can deal in Path of Exile. Curses are things, they're debuffs that you put on the target. Duration means it's a spell that has a duration, so you cast it and then it lasts for a period of time. This could be a heal over time, a damage over time. It could be an AoE. It could be a turret or something like that. Golems are a particular type of minion that you can summon. They're kind of elemental based. Guard skills are skills that will give you defensive protections. So this would be stuff like armor buffs and things like that. Heralds are a special type of buff that you can cast on yourself that give you some benefits. They're a little more complicated. Hexes are similar to curses in the sense that they put debuffs on the targets, but generally your hexes don't deal damage. They reduce enemy stats and things like that. Marks are similar to that as well, but generally speaking, marks are a little more specific and oftentimes are more aligned with dealing increased damage with your weapons and things. Melee abilities specify that these are used in melee range. Mines are a special type of ability where you can throw out a mine that you can then detonate and cast an ability with. Minion represents abilities that summon minions for you. Movement are movement skills such as leap slam or flame dash or shield charge. Nova means that the ability will cast a nova, which means it does a big AoE. Orb will put out some sort of orb, whether it puts out a stationary orb that deals damage or it throws out orbs that travel. Projectiles, we've gone over plenty in this video. Slams are big, massive melee attacks that do huge area of damage effects. We've talked about spells. Stances allow you to swap stances, so you could think about like an offense stance into a defensive stance. Strikes are specifically single target melee style attacks. Sometimes they do more than single target, but that's the general theme. Totems allow you to place a totem on the ground, which then does something for you. Traps are similar to mines, except instead of you being able to trigger them, the enemies walk over them and they trigger. Travel skills are similar to movement skills in the sense that they allow you to travel from place to place. Trigger spells are spells that are triggered when something happens, so they're conditional abilities. Vol skills are going to have their own separate video, but they're basically souped up versions of other skills. And then war cries let you yell out, shout, and get some kind of benefit or buff from doing that. So, like I said at the start of this video, you are going to come out of this with more questions than you have answers. You definitely are. And there's a lot that I couldn't cover in this video. It's already insanely long, but I wanted to make sure this is one of the biggest parts of Path of Exile, and having a deep understanding of how the skill system works and how everything links together is going to provide you with a better starting point in order to not make the mistakes that many new players make, such as having a fireball that's too high level for them to use, or having a fireball but they don't have the right amount of intel to use it, or having a fireball and not realizing that it feels weak because you don't have it supported by anything. Okay, so as you're leveling up in the game, especially earlier on, I'd offer you this advice, this recommendation. If you want to drastically increase your power for a spell gem, level the gem up and make sure that you support it with as many working functional spell gem or spell support gems as possible, whether that's Fireball with multiple projectiles or Unleash or more AoE or whatever. Find yourself a piece of gear that has the right color sockets linked together and plug those support gems into your active skill gem. If you are using attack skill gems, you want to do the same thing, but you have the additional burden of having to make sure that you have a really good strong weapon that you're using as well. Always read the descriptions, always read the tags, and you'll be able to better understand whether or not something you want to try is going to work. We're going to go forward with this, and we're going to talk about spells in even more detail in future videos. We'll get into doing videos for each and every single tag that we've seen, talking about the aura spells, the stances, all that kind of stuff as we move forward. Those videos will be coming a little bit later on because I do want to kind of make sure I lay the groundwork so that if you're new to Path of Exile, you can hop into these videos, and by the time they're done, you can play the game and get started, and then take on some of these more advanced concepts. So I know you're going to have more questions than you do have answers here. The answers will come. Just know that at this point, you should be able to pick a class. You should be able to understand how to use your active abilities and support them. And that's going to go a long way towards making your Path of Exile experience a lot smoother. So if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to throw a like on it. Hit the subscribe button so that you can get notifications for when I put out more guides like this. Ring that bell too if you don't want to miss any of them. Let me know in the comment section below what questions you do have. If you are running into something and you need an immediate answer, go ahead and post it below and I'll respond to you if I can. Otherwise, let me know what other questions you have as a new player and things that you feel like you're running into right away that you'd love to have answers for, and I'll see if I can prioritize making those sorts of videos. All right, you guys, I appreciate you tuning in. I hope that this video has helped you out, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.